100 locations, probably over 2,000 people in the Bay Area. And we, we do design software that creates buildings and cars like the Tesla that's used with our design software. Things like, if you've seen Gravity, the movie, or Avatar, the movie, a lot of those special effects are Autodesk, and people don't always know that, so we're actually cooler than maybe you might think. We've got a couple of very nice locations in San Francisco. One's One Market, and the other one is Pier 9. And you can come to One Market any Wednesday afternoon, right, Joe?
I think it's
tours.
Wednesdays, and I believe they're open to the public on Fridays now.
And Fridays too. So you can get a tour, and it shows you kind of things that our software has been involved in, things like the Bay Bridge, like the new span of the Bay Bridge, or Doyle Drive. So anyway, so that's a little bit about Autodesk. And what I thought I'd do is, they said, talk a little bit about yourself, which is always a little awkward, but I'm gonna do that, and then tell you a little bit about my career, and hopefully then spend a good portion of the time just talking about things that you're interested in. I said to Josephine as we were walking around, this seems like the happiest group of people that I've seen in a long time, and I don't know. I know that you all have chosen to be here, which is, and were selected, so I guess huge congratulations, selected out of 1,200 people, 120 folks were chosen, so you're part of that group. And as I understand it, you just finished the 6-month training and are all about to go off in internship, so another kind of congratulations. How many of you have had other jobs before this? So just, okay, so you guys have all worked. So this might be the first time, though, in a more corporate environment. Is that fair? And I have a 20-year-old daughter who's also just going off to be an intern, and kind of meeting some of you has made me think that I need to train her better. Because, no, I've been so struck by the interns that I've met from Europe at Autodesk, and even just some of the folks here, in terms of social skills and interpersonal skills, and I think kind of traditional education doesn't always provide that, and yet it's one of the most, kind of my experience is it's one of the most important things kind of when you go into a work environment. So I think you're kind of ahead of the game a little bit. My background is, my dad was in the Army, so I was born in Chicago. He was in the Army. We moved around a lot. Settled in Santa Clara Valley before it was called Silicon Valley. And I did something now, kind of in retrospect, you look at your life and you go, it ended up good, but at the time, I went and I became an exchange student in Germany between my junior and senior year in high school. And I wasn't prepared. I didn't speak German. I don't even know why they sent me to that country. And I was so homesick, like. I would do things like pretend, maybe I could break my leg and they'd send me home, and what it did, though, is when I came home, I thought, I'm never leaving home again. I hated that. And so what it did is it made me go to local colleges, because I didn't want, I wasn't really brought up, neither of my parents went to college, so they didn't have any designs on me going away to school or experiencing, kind of living on campus. So I went to Santa Clara University for my freshman year, and I was a math major, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing as a math major? When you get into, when you start getting into senior level math, I'd been a good math student, but it really required a lot, and so I didn't know what I'd do with it. So then I became a history major, and I thought, what am I going to do with history? And I thought, all you can really do not that it's bad, but you can teach, but I didn't think that was kind of my calling. And so I dropped out of Santa Clara, or I finished my freshman year, and we didn't have very much money. And so I thought I'll go to De Anza Junior College, and I'll just take classes, and I'll try to see if I can find something that I'm interested in. And while I was there, I took a communications class, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so, you know, I wasn't of the, I want to study history and kind of that kind of liberal arts. I took this communications class, and I thought, oh, this is it, I love it, I really love it. And I was also a little bit a child of the 60s, so if you know what that means, it's kind of a bit of a hippie, never wanted to work in business because business was bad, and, you know, but I found that there were, but then I also figured out I had to earn a living and somehow kind of pay for things. And so I found out that they had this degree program at San Jose State, which was business, but with a concentration in human resource management. And back then they called it manpower administration, but updated that. However, it allowed me to kind of get involved in the things that I was interested in, and yet go into a field that I thought I could see a career in. And you know, now I think it's so hard that, you know, for students, any kind of, you know, to decide about careers, because I think you have to find things that you have some natural gifts and affinity for, you know, and it's hard to know what that is. And so one thing about going in as interns in a company, it's such a fabulous way of just kind of seeing what that kind of corporate life is, what that kind of culture is, and whether you like it or don't like it, and whether the job you have is one that just requires so much exertion because it doesn't come naturally, or whether it's something that you just kind of get excited about on Sunday evening, which to me is the kind of, you know, the real kind of critical. Do you dread, when you think of Sundays, if you start getting depressed at 2 p.m. on Sunday, and you're thinking about going to work on Monday, you are in the wrong job. So you, in fact, I was talking to a marketing group at Autodesk about that, and somebody said, oh, you're talking about SNAD. And I said, what's that? I said, Sunday night anxiety disorder. but the thought was really, you know, you want to be in a place where you feel excited on Sunday night about what you're going to do on Monday. So I got my degree, and then I think there's a lot of serendipity in some ways. I sat next to, you know, finance class, so I'm at San Jose State now, sat next to Cindy Jones. Cindy Jones worked at Hewlett Packard at the time, and HP was going to send her off to Scotland for 3 months. And she said to me, do you want a job? Do you want my job, basically? Do you want my life? So could you come house sit my cat, house sit my house, and take my job for 3 months? And I didn't have another job offer. It was a temporary role at HP. And I thought, I'll take it, you know, that sounds good. The cat wasn't so good, but then I had to feed a pill to the cat, and if anybody's ever done that, it's not so easy. But I was in a human resources organization, and kind of, you know, I think various people help you along the way. And I went to work for a guy named Crawford Beveridge, who now is actually chairman of the board of Autodesk. He's Scottish. I worked for him at Hewlett Packard, and then I worked for him at Sun Microsystems, and then I'm at Autodesk, and he's on the board. So, but he gave me a couple of lessons. So the first one was I came in and I had this real student mentality, you know, which was I just had to figure out what the teacher wanted me to give back as the, you know, to get a good grade. And, you know, so you're always trying to second guess, what does the teacher want? And when I went into business and was working with Crawford, it became clear it wasn't that he had the answer already. He wanted me to figure out the answer. And I was like, oh, okay, so there's not a right answer. There is somebody wants me to actually think about the right thing to do. And I think education, I don't know, let me ask you guys, is education different today? Do they want you to come up with the answer? Or do they have an answer in their head and you're supposed to give them back? A little bit of both? Right, right.
That's supposed to over there. We're probably explaining a little bit that and what the answer is and why the answer is the way it is.
Yes, so I had to make, I mean, it sounds like you guys have kind of already made that leap. I had to make that leap to say, oh, okay, they're actually thinking that, you know, I've got ideas and I can add value. And then, you know, the other thing he did for me, which was kind of interesting, is he actually invited me to a party that was a Scotch tasting party. And the only reason that this is important, Joe, you've never heard this story, have you?
I have not.
The only reason that that was important is there are a lot of very senior people at that party. And when I got to know them, I thought, they are not any different than I am. They're not like smarter, they're not necessarily better decision makers. Yeah, they have more experience, but it was a really great learning to say, okay, it's not that, you know, there are these executives up there and they're somehow so brilliant and decisive and I'm just this little student. You know, suddenly you go, oh, they're just, you know, I mean, I was doing exactly what you're doing, right? I mean, I had a slightly different path, but I didn't have this, I didn't go to Cornell University, I didn't go to Stanford. And I think, you know, there are opportunities really for everybody, and that it was a really great learning for me, particularly coming from my background where my dad was in shipping and receiving, so he didn't have a real corporate role. I mean, he'd been in the Army and then he was in shipping and receiving. So I had this image, you know, that there were these corporate smart people, and then there was me. And so kind of what Crawford did for me is he said, come and hang out with this group, you know, and it turns out that you are just like they are. And I mean, obviously I had things to learn and all of that, but I think that was really important. And then he gave me an opportunity, actually he left Hewlett-Packard, he went to digital equipment in Europe. And he called me one day and he said, I have a job for somebody here in Switzerland, in Geneva, and nobody internal to DEC wants the job. Are you interested? I said, I don't care if it's scrubbing floors. Yes, I'm interested, because I thought, what a great opportunity to go and work in Europe. And so I worked overseas for 5 years. And that was a huge, if you ever get an opportunity, and certainly if some of you work in high-tech companies, these multinationals now, I mean, we are moving people all the time. And sometimes we don't necessarily move people, but we might say, oh, go do an assignment for 6 weeks. And I was thinking, what did we do, Joe? We had, the guy in your group who's in Toronto, and he went to another country for
He took over the operations in one of the India facilities.
Oh, right.
And we've had a number of exchange programs like that. So beyond India, we've done things in Italy, we've done things in Europe, we've done things in Asia.
So they're in all different roles. I mean, there are opportunities. So I would have said kind of that opportunity today, if it ever comes your way, it made a huge difference in my career, because you really learn about different cultures and interacting at a different level, I think. So anyway, I did that for 5 years. I came back. I worked for a video game company called Activision, and that company, somebody once said, never trust your career fortune the whims of 15-year-old boys. So, but I met my husband there, so that was a good thing. And then I worked for Sun Microsystems, and what I'd say about Sun, I ran training and organizational development. So the one thing in careers, and some of you may have heard of Carol Bartz. She used to be CEO of Autodesk. She's one of the kind of very foremost women in the high-tech field, probably 10 years ago. Then she went to run Yahoo, and she got fired. But that really isn't a reflection on Carol so much as it is the Yahoo board. But she's a big believer in careers that, you know, what you don't do is go up a career ladder, but what you do is you create the most stable base. So you move around to different roles, and she moved from, you know, product management to, I met her when she was in marketing, and then she was in sales, and then she ran an engineering group, and eventually she became CEO. But, you know, whatever your level in an organization, I think her thought about having a really stable base by having skills that are in a lot of different areas. And that's what I tried to do in my career. It's within human resources generally, but I have experience on the talent acquisition side. I have experience on the training and OD side. I've been what we call HR business partner. So it's kind of, I think that breadth is important. And I think sometimes we have employees who are like, I've got to know the next level up. I've got to have the next level up. And I think you may, but you know, there's an opportunity to grow in a lot of different ways. So anyway, and then maybe we'll open it up for questions. Just to finish, Sun was not a culture I loved. And so that my story about kind of being depressed on a Sunday, I mean, that really was kind of coming home on a Friday night. My husband and I had lived up in Marin, and I kept a condominium down in San Jose where I was working. And on Friday nights, I crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, and I would then spend all of Friday night and Saturday, what felt like in therapy with my husband, trying to like work through why things weren't working right, and why people didn't do things, and why, you know, but not in a normal way, in a way that didn't make me feel good about myself. So if you've ever been in a situation like that, and then he'd spend all weekend kind of talking me down. I'd get depressed on Sunday, and then I'd go back on Monday and I'd put on this suit of armor, and then I'd go face it. And you know, that's an okay experience to have once, but it's a little bit like a frog in boiling water. You know that expression, they don't even know they're in. If you gradually churn up the flames on a frog in a pot of boiling water, or a pot of water, they won't jump out because the changes are so gradual. So if you don't know, right, that you're happy, sometimes you don't get it until you actually get out and you look back. So once I got out, I thought, thank goodness, that is not the right culture for me. I won't be in that environment. And you know, and granted, I was lucky because I could find other jobs, and not everybody can do that. But I went to work at Autodesk, and the reason I love Autodesk is we got to create a culture that I think is very respectful of people. And you know, it's not like I don't have a bad day now and then, but mostly I feel really energized about being in work. And I feel like the skill set, you know, they're all sort. Have you guys done anything like Myers-Briggs?
Yes.
You did Myers-Briggs. There are things that, there's another thing called Colby profile, but it's around, you know, if you're not a detail person and the job you have requires tons of attention to detail, it just wears you out, right? So you kind of have to figure out, I think, what you're good at, and then when you're doing the things that you really are great at, I think you just sing, you know, you're great at it. So for me at Autodesk, kind of the culture and the kinds of work I did was good, and then I got promoted, and here I am. So why don't I stop there and just, I want to make sure that this kind of covers the things that you guys are interested in. So what would you want to know now that you're just about to go into a business environment? Question?
Yes, hi, my name is Daniel. I was wondering, you said that the culture at Autodesk is like what did you say, it was like more laid back culture, or?
Well, it's respectful. I think it's, I don't know that I'd say it's laid back. I would say it is, one, it really is respectful and tries to treat people with dignity. And so, you know, I mean, we're not a shouting kind of culture. We assume that people are professionals. You know, we don't monitor sick leave. We just, if somebody's sick, they're sick. And, you know, certainly if there are abuses, we try to deal with them because it's not good for our whole team. We're very collaborative, so we like, you know, people who can work with other people. And yet, we think we're doing, you know, we're in high tech, we've gone from what people would describe as fast followers to being innovators. And like, we're very much into 3D printing and some of the new works, you know, around that. So, you know, being an innovator means you have to, it's not laid back, it's kind of fast-paced, high energy, but respectful, I think.
And by my layback, I mean like in terms of like maybe like Zynga or other partners, they make it real, like feel real homey, like they let them bring their dog to work, like things like that. That's why I was just,
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
mean like layback, like slacking off or like anything like that.
Right, I see what
what
you're
I'm
saying.
saying?
Yeah, so we do, in San Rafael, in those buildings where we can, Joe is our, do you want to answer that question?
Okay, good.
See, I'm also known as a good
Maybe I'll
dog.
stand up. I think our culture is interesting. Now, a bit of my history, I've been with Oracle, I've been with Adobe, I was with a startup called Unwired Planet, and then that became a company called OpenWave. So I've been through a number of corporate cultures, and if we have time, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I too am an immigrant, and we won't go there yet. But the company culture is an interesting one. And so of those different companies that I talked about, you know what surprises me the most about Autodesk? They have folks, employees there who have worked 20 years there, right? So most of the tech companies that I was with, you know, their typical shelf life was 2 to 4 years. But at Autodesk, it's easy to find people who have been there like 10 plus years. So with Oracle and those and Adobe, I stayed at the max 7 years. I'm going past 10 years at Autodesk. It's an incredibly great culture.
He has a great boss.
And I have a great boss. That's why I'm here today, to support my great boss. And that is one of the key things throughout your career, is to find people like Jan, who are great sponsors, supporters, mentors, educators. So I'll give you kudos.
I was only teasing that.
No, but in terms of the culture, I would, you know, I think it's changing. It always evolves. Our average typical age in the Bay Area was around 45 years old. Today, if you go down to Pier 9, the average age is like 25 to 30. So the demographics is changing. So I encourage you to go check out Autodesk.com, look at careers, and you'll get an insight and a peek into what the Autodesk culture looks like.
Thanks.
And the facilities, I mean, we do try to make it comfortable, and we're experimenting with a lot of different looks and feels. But we have a lot of fun things at Pier 9. We have a swinging chair. It's a conference room that's a swinging table with 3 chairs on each side. And I was there swinging with the mayor one day. But we have dogs. I bring my dog. I have a dog, and I sometimes bring my dog into work. And I mean, it's pretty casual. It's a lot. If you see our CEO, you know, and I think a lot. There's a funny expression that's called, it's the fish rots from the head down, but it does really mean that the CEO sets a real tone about what kind of place it is and how you treat people. And our CEO is great. He's from a technical background, you know. I mean, mostly he's in jeans, t-shirt. He's a maker himself, but he's very respectful of people. But he expects things to get done, you know. So if you ask him, I won't use his language, but he'd say, "We want you to get stuff done." You know, that's what he values. So he uses a different word than stuff. So you know, I think that culture, and it looks a little different, you know, if you go to Singapore, our buildings look a little different. But I think what's been interesting is Joe's really gone with kind of the character, you know, we're a design company, you know, the character of the building helps define kind of the look and feel. So hopefully it's not just that 90s kind of corporate look. Other questions?
Hi, my name is Kiana. Knowing that we're young adults trying to go transition into the business world, how do you give advice as far as trying to stay within the professional field, but also having that casual feel, like being so lenient, like bringing in your dog or wearing, you know, jeans to work or flip-flops to work? How could you give us an advice to stay focused in what we have to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting balance. I think that those are not opposing thoughts, that I think you can, you know, and I think there are great companies that are more formal too. So, you know, that is, high tech tends to be a little bit more casual in terms of dress and the dogs and all of that. You know, in some places at Google, I think people are on scooters, you know, and so, but then there are also some very fine companies that might be in the financial fields that are a little more formal. I don't think that those define one way or the other whether people get things done and are skillful in how they interact. I mean, what your question though does trigger for me, and I started out by saying I thought it was so great, some of the classes you guys are taking around kind of interpersonal skills, general social skills, because not everybody has them, and it turns out that they are remarkably important at work. And in fact, I think something that people call emotional intelligence, do you guys know what? But you know, it's that ability to hear from people, to be both an advocate and use inquiry, that ability to have good judgment, to not have your ego override kind of what's right for the company. All of that stuff becomes more and more important. So it's important kind of when you enter an organization. In fact, Carol Bartz, our old CEO, I thought she had an interesting way of saying this, which was, if you are, she'd say it as nice, but if you are socially adept and have emotional intelligence and you're not great on accomplishing tasks, it's not great, but people give you more of a chance, you know, and they're much more open. And, you know, that's how, it's hard to measure somebody's results, but it's very easy to see, are they optimistic, you know, do they go in with a great attitude, are they trying their very best? And so it's that emotional intelligence that actually ends up being the problem for some of the people at senior levels. So, you know, I've worked with executive teams. The only reason I have ever been involved in firing an executive is because they don't have emotional intelligence. It is never because they're not smart enough or that they don't understand their profession or any of that. It is always because they're weird. They're just, you know, they don't have some of the skills that people need. So I think your program, at least my understanding of it, is that is hugely important. I mean, you still have to get the job done, but I think the issue of casualness doesn't define the professionalism of an organization. I think it's just kind of what defines the culture. And you might like, you know, some people like it more formal. I've worked in both, and you know, and both are fine. For me, what defines it is, as Joe said, you have to like who you work for, you have to respect them, you have to feel they respect you. Other questions? I know there was.
Hi, my name is Kate. I was just wondering, what was the most rewarding experience that you had in Autodesk, and also what were the biggest challenges you worked with?
So I'll give you the challenge first. For a little while, I worked for somebody, right when I joined, that was difficult. It was really, really difficult. It turns out ultimately he got on some medication and he was much better. But that, at the time, he wasn't, and so he was very up and down, and I thought his judgment on things was off, and I loved the company, but I didn't like working for him. And so what I did is I set myself a 6-month target, and I said, I'm gonna write down every single thing that I can do to make this situation better. Because I can't make him not be moody, I can't make him not be whatever I wanted. But I will, you know, and so I just listed all those things, you know, and one had to do with, I thought if I try to meet with him more frequently, and I had another idea about, I had a coach, and if I talked to my coach about it. And another idea was to invite him into my client group. And so I had a whole list, and I said, I'm gonna do this for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I'm either gonna find that I'm happy, in which case I'll stay. And if I don't, then I'm gonna do something, because you don't do your best work when you're not happy, right? You just, and once again, you know, I think the learning for me is, I think and it did work out. And actually, he did get on drugs, and I'm so happy. Just good drugs, good drugs. I don't want any kind of messages. No, but I mean, clearly he was bipolar. He was something, you know, that he needed support. And so that, but you know, you will bump into people. I think my learning was you will bump into people who are difficult, and it's kind of how much ownership you take and what you try to do to make it work. And I always think you should do at least 51%. You should try to meet them 51, 70% of the way. And then at some point you say, this isn't an environment that is healthy for me. And so, or good, you know. The most rewarding, oh my gosh, there's so many things that are exciting. I think when I run a training programs, and I could guess that this might be that, you take people at work where there's no emotion, there's no agenda from the kind of support they get from each other. We do something called the Employee Leadership Program. So it's a residential course, 4 days. All of our, well, not all of them, but a lot of our employees go through it. And it's about how do you participate in a team. You know, the last activity is we each write about each other, why I would like having you as a coworker and what I would find difficult about having you as a coworker. So that's the last activity. But the whole week is about building up the trust that you can be honest with somebody. And when you see people really being helpful and honest with each other, and we sponsor this program. I mean, we've run it in like a block away from Tiananmen Square. We run it in India. We run it in Phuket. We run it all over the world, in Russia. So that's kind of, you know, when I see people feeling like they can, what is it, that army thing, you know, be the best you can be. But if you feel that you can set up an environment, you can be your very best. I mean, to me, that's a kick. So, other
Hi, my name is, yes.
or disagreements, you can disagree with me.
Oh, no, I agree with you, that's no problem. But my name is Seth, and I was wondering, since we're all going to be making a jump into kind of a new corporate environment, what do you think are important things to look out for when making that leap?
So one thing, never be afraid to say you don't know or don't understand. And I think it's tempting because not everybody's a great trainer, and they'll explain things to you quickly, and you'll think, I should have gotten that, I should have gotten that, and everybody would much rather have you say, I don't understand, can you take me through that again? So I think having that comfort level to ask questions and in some ways make yourself a little vulnerable, I think that's important. I also think, and I don't, this will sound, it'll sound funny, but I think there are people at work, you know, you can get in little groups at work that they're the groups that, you know, there are always like 2 or 3 people who are just really negative, and they kind of like talking about other people, and they try to bring you down, and, you know, and Autodesk has some of those people, but, you know, every company does. And so I think you kind of have to stay a little bit above it, you know, if people try to bring you into that, I think you just, it's not, I mean, you have to do it gracefully, you know, it's not like, oh, I can't talk to you, you know, like that's not gonna work. So I think you have to watch out for that a little bit. And I think just people, I think sometimes, maybe because, well, let me ask Joe that question. Any pitfalls? You think, because you've worked with two of the interns very closely, so anything that you think is something to watch out for?
You know, I think to your point, I think they are a great fit with the organization. I think they're taking, you know what I see the most is the level of commitment and dedication to the job. And even to Jan's point, if you don't understand it, if we see that level of commitment, oh my God, I mean, the mentors that are assigned to them will work 3x as hard to make sure that you understand and to help bring you along, if you will. And so I think it's really about demonstrating that, having that discipline and demonstrating that level of commitment, and people will see it. And I always say to my own employees, I will invest in those who reinvest with me. And so, yeah, why would I waste time with someone who's just kind of half in? I don't want those folks in my organization. So if you're in, we're in it with you. So I think it's that level of commitment and personal discipline. And if I could just throw in something, that's why I'm so amazed by this program and so pleased to be even a small part of it. And I love the fact that Jan is here from, you know, a very huge corporation sharing her thoughts with you today. Any little tidbit of wisdom that you can share as you graduate and embark on your careers. Our interns have done a fabulous job. We're going to bring them on after this, after their first 6 months. And so they're well off on their career.
Other comments or questions?
My name is Will, and I was actually wondering, were there any other specific traits or impressions that the intern or any other intern that made you guys feel that they belong in your company?
Gosh, I've met them a few times. I would have said, and Joe can answer as well. So one was that.
Your show, Jan.
No. I would have said, I mean, one is that passion. So, you know, and I mean, Joe talked about it in terms of dedication and commitment, that, you know, that willingness to work that little bit extra. I mean, that matters so much to organizations. And so I know when I don't know if it was Jose who said this, he said, we're really hungry, you know, but you want people who like want to be there and want to do the right thing for the company, you know, and I think that can start at really lower levels in an organization. You know, that it's like, okay, I got to make a decision about this, and I'm going to wear the hat, almost as if I were CEO. What's the right thing for the company? And I think that passion for the, you know, if you show passion and commitment, that's 50% of the way. And then if you have the good interpersonal skills and kind of come forward a bit. You know, I think, funny, I was talking to a group of women leaders, and, you know, like, what, is it, they were talking about how important it is to be able to have a voice. And so, you know, I think interns as well. People want your thoughts, opinions. In fact, we did something, this is a different group of interns, but we have a technology that's called, I don't know, it's on air. It's in Expo or something. But it basically, you just come in here, take a video of me, and then it goes onto everybody's computer around the world, right? And it's really easy to set up. So our CEO does a half-hour talk once a month. And we normally have somebody who works in my organization doing employee communications interview them. And so this year we said, let's get 2 interns. And we took 2 interns, and they did the interviews. And we just projected it around the world. It's fabulous. I mean, really fabulous, smart questions. But my whole point is, you have people who are willing to kind of step up a little bit, and sometimes you have to go a bit outside of your comfort zone. And, gosh, it is scary. And if I'm one of the people Joe was talking about. I've been at Autodesk 21 years. And so if you had asked me when I joined, somebody stayed 21 years now, would be what, the year 2035? It's kind of, you can't really, so if any of you join Autodesk, and you stay a long time, and we have people who joined out of high school who are still there, right? So, anyway, what was I saying? I was talking about stepping up. What was I saying? Okay, this is a test. What was I talking about? About stepping up and, oh yeah, so that, anybody joining an organization, I think feels anxious. I think the thing to remember is just because you're interns doesn't mean you're the only people who feel anxious. Any new person going into a company feels anxious. I feel anxious going into a new office that I haven't been at, right? So everybody feels a little anxious. And I think it would be odd if you didn't, and I think it's that little bit of anxiety that makes you good, because you care, and then you put kind of, some energy into it. And so I think, though, that sometimes you do have to overcome, particularly if you're a shyer person, or you are a natural introvert. My daughter's an introvert, and I was kind of talking to her about sometimes you've got to just take a little step out there, because the world's kind of, I've heard there's a book about introverts these days to say, don't be embarrassed. Introverts are fabulous for all sorts of reasons. But it is a world in business that puts some premium on, and Joe's an introvert, right? It puts some premium
Don't point
on,
that out.
no, on getting up in front of people, getting, speaking up in a meeting, having an opinion. And that's kind of hard for people. And I heard that you're doing presentation skills programs here. That's fabulous. Being able to learn to even speak at a table. I remember the first job I had that in corporate, and we were all sitting in a U, and they said, we're going to do an introduction now. I could still see myself sitting there. And there are like 20 people in front of me. And this was just like you're going to introduce yourself. You're going to say, I'm Jan Becker, I work da-da-da. My heart raced for the whole time it took to go through every other person, right? Because you're not even paying attention to that. All you're thinking about is, it's coming to me, it's coming to me. Okay, what are they going to say? I'll clear my throat, okay. And then, but I wasn't trained on presentation skills or any of that you guys are. So that anxiety is normal. Everybody will have it, and if you can kind of just break through it a little bit, and go a bit outside of your comfort zone. Not on day one, give yourself time to find where the bathrooms are and stuff like that. But I think it's a great, you have been given tools that I think will really make a difference. Hello.
Hi,
Am I at the end?
Hi, Joe.
Hello.
I'm Chaitra, for those of you who don't know me. I work on corporate engagement. I've been taking a lot of students on meetings to meet their managers before they start. The most common question I get from students is, I'm afraid of making mistakes. I'm afraid of messing things up. I'm going to be new. And I kind of tell them it's not about making a mistake, because that's okay. It's about how you handle it and what you do after that. So just from that, those lines, if you and Joe can both speak to maybe a time when you were starting out, when you did make a mistake, or you made a decision you would make differently now, what that was, and kind of what you learned from it.
That's a good question. Gosh, there's so many mistakes. It's hard to choose out of, I'm trying to think of one, the ones you are more, it wasn't a mistake, but it was it was a funny story, I thought. It was a presentation I had to give, and I was really nervous. And It was for I didn't work on the executive team, it was at Sun Microsystems. And I don't know why, but you know, sometimes your body does things that you don't want it to do when you're nervous. And my right knee started shaking. So I'm up there, and I've got some dress on, you know, like, so the whole thing is, and I was up in front of that room, watching my knee. It was almost as if it was connected to some other body. But the thing I did learn about that is, particularly when you are nervous around certain things, I think I didn't say anything about it, I hid it. And I think it's much better, so if you are in an environment where you have to speak up or do something, if you feel nervous, the best thing you can do is mention that I feel a little, like, I'm not used to giving presentations, right? And so then, and you immediately get the audience on your side. And so I think what I didn't do is I tried to hide that nervousness, but it's a little hard when your knee's kind of going like that, so, yeah, I don't know, do you have a, and then there's just tons of mistakes that I've made, but,
I'm gonna walk up and join you, James, making up my by the way, this is the uniform at Autodesk, so, you know, get one, no. We wear jeans and dress shirts.
this is me dressed up.
This is me dressed up too, and yeah. I am very nervous right now in front of this group of people. But in terms of mistakes, hey, look, I made a mistake yesterday, right? I made probably 10 mistakes last week.
What was yesterday's?
No, I mean, every day you go into a meeting, right? And I engage with senior vice presidents all day long. And things that come out of your mouth sometimes, you know, you go, oh my God, did I really say that? Right? You go home and you try to beat yourself up for it. And so I've stopped doing that. Don't beat yourself up. You'll make mistakes every day, okay? I listen to the SVPs, the VPs, and all folks across the company. They make mistakes every day. And so they probably are thinking, did I really say that? Right? And so I think maybe not a specific example, but what I tell my team is that every day you have the opportunity to do it again. Right? Next morning you wake up, do it better. Right? You had that mistake, you said something stupid, don't say it again the next day. Right? Don't repeat yourself. Because if you repeat yourself, you really are stupid. So, anyway, just, yeah, learn from your mistakes. And, yeah, I think that's probably the best bet.
I think the other thing you said is really right about not beating yourself up too much, because, you know, like I do a training program and I get reviews, and, you know, you get 20 fabulous reviews and you get one bad one, you know, from somebody in the class, and you just feel like that's all you could focus on. How could you say that about, you know, and it's like, that's the only thing you thought about. You didn't think about the 20 that were really positive. You know, the other thing, you just, you can focus on, a little bit like Joe said, if you say something and you wish you hadn't said it, honestly, other people will forget it in about 1 minute. You can hold on to that for a long time, and I think you do just have to let go of it. Now, if you are constantly saying dumb things, you know, like, you know, I mean, you can't, you have to have some judgment, obviously, but a few slip-ups nobody even remembers, because everybody's focused on themselves. They all are worried about kind of what they have done or said or how they came across. So,
I think to the question that was asked about how do you not make mistakes, or how do you, when you launch into your career, think about your career and your job, or as you pursue what you're doing. You have to protect and create your own brand. You have your own brand, right? What's the brand of Jan Becker? What's the brand of Joe Chen? What's your brand, right, as you move forward? How do people see you? How do you project yourself, right? And so I think you need to be aware of that you're creating your own brand, right? And to Jan's point, I think by being successful along the way, your brand gets stronger. You gain credibility. You gain something called, in corporate America, you gain
credibility.
credibility and, what's the word I'm looking for, political capital within the company. Right? You've had a series of great successes so that if you do something stupid or you make a mistake, hey, you know, those 10, like Jan said, you've had a long history of doing great things. Everybody makes mistakes. So again, I wouldn't torture yourself or keep beating yourself up about one thing. It's constantly developing that brand and winning and making those successful wins. Again, you get to train.
Yeah. Bill Griffin, one of our vice presidents of sales, I think he has an interesting, he does motivational speaking sometimes, and he always says it's about making sure that the person's interaction with you, that they come away from that interaction feeling more positive than when they came into it, you know, but it is about sometimes first impressions, but it is about kind of consistency in how people view you, and you know, it's around showing your passion and your energy and your dedication and your enthusiasm and your positiveness. You know, that's important as part of your brand. How are we on time? Maybe one last question?
We have time for one more question.
Or 2 questions?
Hi, my name is Carlos Martin. What are some opportunities that interns at Autodesk have taken that have surprised or impressed you?
Some, you mean like business decisions?
Or leading meetings or facilitating?
That in terms of the meeting have taken that surprised me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I've done some team buildings, and you know, you're always surprised. I don't know if this is helpful, but you know, there's openness at work, and then there's a limit that you really don't want to go quite as open. And business environments, particularly if you do team building, will always try to get you to be open about yourself. And it's great, everything that's truthful, but I do remember kind of running a team building, and it was kind of brand new group, and this one guy said, I have a gambling problem. And I thought, you know, sometimes it's just not the right time to talk about that. So, you know, for me, when I think about it, I think so some surprises are just, you know, we want people to be open. You know, there's a great expression, you go to hire an employee and you hire a human being, right? And so one of the things about Autodesk is we love, you know, we accept everybody, and, you know, you come, Joe has 2 kids, you know, he has a wife, I know his back, I mean, you know, we know, people know about us as human beings, and so that's good. And then there's also just, you know, kind of a judgment about kind of how far you take that. And then just in terms of other meetings that have surprised me, I think the power of team, you know, there's kind of a hokey expression, you know, team stands for together, everyone achieves more. And that's really sometimes true and sometimes not. So some teams really, they don't work well. If you've ever been part of a team that doesn't work well, it's a disaster. But if you've ever been part of a team that actually has come together, the ideas that can come out of the group that really are just extraordinary. I mean, so that's kind of when I think about, you know, a unique time is seeing some people who I would have thought could have come out with something, and then walking out of the room and seeing just a brilliant idea. That's just kind of very amazing. But you have to work at having a team like that.
Great. Let's all give a round of applause for both.
Thank you very much. I really wish all of you great luck. I think it'll be a fabulous 6 months. So
Thank you.
thank you.
So if anyone